Snow on their car, I couldn't resist. Petty revenge, the pristine gleam of my Subaru, a 2018 Impreza in crystal white pearl, was a point of pride. I washed and waxed it religiously, touching up even the smallest scratches with a detailer's precision. It was, in the chaotic mess of my life, a small island of order, which made Chad and Brittany's casual disregard for it all the more infuriating. Chad, with his leased BMW Z4 in a shade of electric blue that screamed midlife crisis, and Brittany, glued to his arm like a particularly vapid barnacle, were a constant source of irritation at the office. Their combined aura of entitled arrogance hung thick in the air, a miasma of designer labels and dismissive glances. And their parking. God, their parking. It was never quite over the line, but always close enough to make getting in and out of my car a delicate dance. A dance that, more often than not, ended with me squeezing through a gap barely wide enough for a cat, muttering dark curses under my breath. Then there were the dings. Tiny, almost imperceptible marks on my doors, souvenirs from their careless flinging. I tried leaving notes polite, almost pleading, but they vanished without a trace. Talking to Mr. Henderson, the office manager, was pointless. Everyone knew Chad's dad was a significant client, rules simply didn't apply. Just let it go, Liam, Sarah, my coworker and occasional lunch buddy, would say, her voice laced with a sympathy that only fueled my simmering rage. It's just a car. But it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol. A symbol of my hard work, my meticulousness, my desperate attempt to control at least one aspect of my life. And they, Chad and Brittany, with their careless entitlement, were chipping away at it, one ding at a time. Then came the snow. It started innocently enough, a light dusting that turned into a blizzard by mid-afternoon. By the time the workday ended, a thick blanket of white covered everything. I bundled up, grabbed my snow brush and scraper, and headed out, determined to conquer the elements. Clearing my car was almost therapeutic. The rhythmic scrape of the brush against the windshield, the satisfying thud of snow hitting the ground, it was almost meditative. I meticulously cleared the roof, the hood, every inch of glass, ensuring perfect visibility. I even swept around the tires just because. I stood back, admiring my handiwork, a small beacon of order in the winter wasteland. That's when I saw them. Chad's ridiculous blue car, half buried under a mountain of snow. They'd arrived late, as usual, and clearly hadn't bothered with anything beyond the bare minimum. The windshield was vaguely clear, a small peephole carved out in the center. The rest of the car was a pristine, untouched white. They climbed in, Chad revving the engine impatiently. Brittany was probably complaining about her hair getting messed up. He threw the car into reverse and with a screech of tires, backed out of the space. And that's when it happened. A massive chunk of snow, dislodged from the roof by the sudden acceleration, slid off with a sickening thump. It landed squarely on my freshly cleared hood, leaving a visible dent. I stood there, frozen, watching as they sped away, oblivious to the damage they'd caused. My chest tightened, a knot of pure, unadulterated rage forming in my stomach. I could practically hear Sarah's voice, "Just let it go, Liam," but I couldn't. I stormed back inside, my hands clenched into fists. Mr. Henderson was just coming out of his office, looking flustered. "Did you see that?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He wrung his hands. "Terrible weather, Liam, terrible. I'm sure they didn't mean to. They dented my car," I practically shouted. He looked away. "Accidents happen. Maybe you should file a claim with your insurance." That was it, the final straw. The blatant disrespect, the lack of accountability, the sheer, unadulterated unfairness of it all. Something snapped. I went back to my desk, my mind racing. I couldn't confront them directly. Chad would just laugh, and Mr. Henderson would do nothing. I needed something subtle, something petty. The seed of an idea began to sprout. I spent the next few days observing their routine. Their arrival time, their departure time, their preferred parking spot. I noted every detail, the slightly crooked bumper sticker on the back of Chad's car, the way the driver's side mirror rattled at high speeds, the faint scratch near the gas cap. Knowledge was power. I confided in Sarah, carefully omitting the specifics of my plan. "They dented my car, Sarah," I said, my voice low. "They just drove off like nothing happened." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "That's awful, Liam. You deserve better than that." Her words were all the encouragement I needed. Another storm was predicted for the following week. Perfect. The day arrived, bringing with it a fresh blanket of snow. I watched from my office window as Chad and Brittany parked, once again, carelessly straddling the line. The snow was piling up, a perfect canvas for my revenge. After the workday ended, I waited until dusk, when the parking lot was mostly deserted. I bundled up in my warmest coat, pulled a beanie low over my forehead, and wrapped a scarf around my face. I looked like a ninja, or maybe a particularly inept bank robber. I parked my car a few rows over, keeping Chad's blue monstrosity in sight. I grabbed my supplies from the trunk, a large bucket, a shovel, and a garden trowel. My plan was simple, yet elegant. I was going to sculpt. Working quickly and efficiently, I shoveled snow from around Chad's car, creating a small clearing. Then, using the trowel, I began to shape the snow on his hood. It was slow, painstaking work, my fingers numb with cold, but I persevered. I wasn't an artist, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I had a clear vision in mind. I shaped the snow into well, let's just say it was an abstract representation of a middle finger. A very large, very detailed, and very icy middle finger. It took me almost an hour, but finally it was done. A glistening, obscene monument to Chad and Brittany's arrogance, sitting proudly on the hood of their leased BMW. The weight of the snow would undoubtedly cause a minor, almost imperceptible dent, a dent that Chad, with his obsessive attention to detail, would surely notice and obsess over. I stepped back, admiring my handiwork. It was petty, I knew, but it was also satisfying. I cleaned up my tools, carefully erasing any trace of my presence. I brushed snow over my footprints, making it look like the sculpture had simply materialized out of thin air. As I drove away, I glanced back. The icy finger stood out against the blue paint, a silent testament to my revenge. The next morning, I arrived at work early, eager to witness the aftermath. I positioned myself by the window, pretending to read a report, my eyes glued to the parking lot. It wasn't long before Chad and Brittany arrived. They parked, oblivious, and walked towards the building, their heads buried in their phones. Then Brittany looked up. Her jaw dropped. She stopped dead in her tracks, pointing towards the car. Chad followed her gaze, and his face turned a shade of purple that almost matched his car. I watched, trying to suppress a smile, as they circled the vehicle, examining the icy appendage with growing disbelief and anger. I could practically hear their frustrated shouts. They brushed the snow off, their movements jerky and agitated. Chad stormed inside, presumably to complain to Mr. Henderson, who, I was sure, would do absolutely nothing. Later that day, I ran into Sarah in the break room. "Did you see Chad's car?" I asked, trying to sound innocent. "Someone put a huge thing made of snow on his hood." Sarah's eyes twinkled. "No way, seriously, that's awful. Who would do such a thing?" "I have no idea," I said, shrugging. "Some people are just crazy, I guess." I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. Chad and Brittany were clearly baffled and frustrated. They spent the rest of the day casting suspicious glances at everyone, trying to figure out who had dared to vandalize their precious car. They never looked my way. In the days that followed, I noticed a subtle change. Chad and Brittany started parking more carefully, staying within the lines. They even seemed a little less obnoxious. The dent on my car was still there, a constant reminder of their carelessness, but it didn't bother me as much anymore. I knew I'd get it fixed eventually. But for now, the memory of that icy finger, pointing accusingly at the sky, was enough. I polished my Impreza, admiring its gleam in the winter sunlight. It was still my island of order, a small sanctuary in a chaotic world. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. A quiet satisfaction knowing that, even in the face of arrogance and entitlement, a little bit of petty revenge could go a long way.